Hello and welcome. My name is Natalie, and today I'm going to be your host in guiding you through a interview with my mom, Kelly. She is a born and raised California native, and she is going to help us give some perspective on the California cultures, what it means to be from California, why she wanted to come back, and then also the lack of knowledge that she was given on native tribes growing up, as well as some of her views and opinions growing up here on the right to having their own business on their lands with the casinos, and how she feels like that impacted the economy as well. So let's get started. So my mom is 50 years old. She was born and raised in California, as I mentioned in the intro. Um, But she grew up in a single parent household, and they kind of skipped around a lot in Southern California. Her mom always worked 2 or 3 jobs, and she was pretty self sufficient. So, that being said, I felt like she was going to have a pretty decent perspective and not too much of the shiny California glasses over her eyes. Talking about those stereotypes that we cover in class. So I went ahead and asked my mom what kind of activities she did growing up, as well as how the media had influenced her growing up.
Well, I do remember as a young child when we had a serial killer named the Night Stalker when I was about 10 years old. And I do remember being so afraid because we would watch the news, and he was climbing into bedroom windows near us and killing people. And that's the only way I can think of how the media affected me.
So with that, did you feel safe growing up, and what was the crime like, and how has it evolved?
Ah, so I didn't feel safe growing up. I did have fears of being kidnapped, having someone sneak in and steal me in the middle of the night, but I don't.
So, that being said, I felt like my mom's story really put into emphasis what the media can do to influence you. This kind of links into stereotypes in the way that it can make California look very shiny or make you fear for where you live, despite it being one of the safest places. As she'd mentioned separately in our interview, she said when she was driving by in a car, she saw signs that always said safest city in the world. So that just proves how powerful the media is and how powerful stereotypes can be. So, moving along, I wanted to find out why my mom stayed in California. Why California? And then also, why did she come back to California after leaving for so many years? My mom was a flight attendant for 7+ years based in LAX, and she has a ton of family in Southern California. So, let's go ahead and dive in.
Why did you stay in California?
I would say I stayed because I actually never thought of leaving California. I loved it here. The climate was great, and I actually got my career here, found my spouse and married, and had no reason to leave.
And why did you come back to California?
Because I missed home. I missed the climate. I missed mainly living by the beach and living by family. And it just has the feeling of home for me.
My mom, just like the Native Americans, seek that feeling of coming back to a place that felt like home and she had a history with, much like the Native Americans that still go and visit the Pavona site on the CSULB campus. So, next, I asked my mom what the economy was like growing up and how it's evolved in the state of California.
So growing up, I had no understanding of like, did we have a lot of money? Did we have a little money? I had no understanding of that. I didn't know. As I grew up and watched people be gifted their homes by their parents, and then my husband and I couldn't afford to buy a home, and we weren't being gifted a home. It's definitely become harder for someone who's grown up here to buy their own home here.
So with that, I felt like my mom directly related to the Native Americans in the film Lost Tribes, feeling that displacement in your own home from your own place that you grew up, and you can't even afford to live where your family's lived all of your life. And I feel like it also adds on the emphasis that the economy has in fact changed. A place that her parents were able to afford before many, many years ago, she can't afford that same place because times have changed. So moving along, I also wanted to ask her what her experience was in school and the knowledge she had on the Native Americans in California, as well as what she learned, and her points of view on it.
We learned a lot of the Spanish conquest, and she would create these worksheets for us that were interactive. So we would, she would write what it was, and then we'd have to fill in the blanks, and then we'd follow the trail. So it was like a timeline that she created for us, that made history interesting. I don't remember exactly everything, she taught.
Or anything about Native Americans.
I don't remember anything about Native Americans. Honestly, I don't. I know
So with this knowledge of my mom's past experience, it just proves that on the article about the Native Americans fighting to get more of their history in schools is very valid, because as she was growing up, she didn't know much about it. But we're going to see how she feels about the Native Americans and having casinos on their lands.
I feel like it's their land and it's absolutely their choice. And I know it's a source of revenue for their land, for their communities. And I think it's perfectly acceptable, and I think it's a great opportunity.
See, I felt like my mom could directly relate with the Native Americans in the way that she knows what it's like to come back to somewhere she called home and struggle to be able to afford to live here. So finding it acceptable for the Native Americans to be able to do whatever they need to afford their own home. I think despite the economy change and things getting more expensive, the stereotypes that might make California sound scary, such as things like the Night Stalker, or having the single story of, people thinking you're rich and able to afford everything and every luxury, doesn't deter you from wanting to live in California, because it's a great place to be and it's got a lot of history. Just like my mom is rooted in California with her friends and family, as well as rooted in her memories. So with that, thank you so much for joining us today in our podcast interview about California. Have a wonderful rest of your day.